If you're struggling with your vitality, energy, mood, focus, or sleep, this podcast is for you. Your host, Dr. Ann Sung, ER doctor and aerospace flight surgeon, will help you reach for the stars and remove the barriers or blockades that have been holding you back from living your best life. If you've been challenged by your health, relationships, or productivity, then it's time for a breakthrough. So here's your host, Dr. Ann Sung.
Hello, welcome to It's Not Rocket Science Show, and I am your host, Dr. Ann Sung. And today I have Dave Denniston, CFA, who is here with us to talk about financial freedom, how to create wealth, not just in physicians, but professionals, essentially, people, anyone who wants to create financial freedom and wealth, because it's one of the 5 freedoms that we often talk about, and it is so important to learn the mistakes no matter what stage you're in so that you can avoid it. And this is what we're going to be talking about, the mistakes at different stages of investing or financial life. So Dave, thank you so much for being on the show. And would you please just give us a little bit about who you are, your background, and why you do what you do?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on. It is an honor to be here and spend time with you. A little bit about me. I am many different things. I generally consider myself an entrepreneur now. I have a financial planning business. I have a land flipping business. I'm a tax lien investor. And generally, I try things all the time. I had a mobile gaming kit business for a little while. But because of my daughter, who is now 10 years old, she was born super duper premature. I have a real heart for physicians in particular, which is how you and I happened to connect. And she was born 12.4 ounces. She was less than a pound when she came into this world, if you can believe it. I mean, literally, I was in the OR as the physician took her out, the neonatologist did, and translucent skin. Her lungs weren't fully developed. They had to shove this little teeny weeny breathing tube down her throat because her lungs weren't fully developed yet. She was 23 weeks gestationally. So part of my mission is to empower doctors and, of course, other professionals with financial knowledge, get them to be financially free, expose them to more than just stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, which I do. I love those things. But there's so much more outside of that people can learn about and be empowered in trying different financial experiments and seeing what rings true with them and what can get them to where they want to go to experience what financial freedom is for them.
Yeah, I completely agree in terms of diversification. I didn't know anything about real estate until recently, and when I went into investing in multiplex, but before that, all I knew was investing in index funds through my work, and that was it. And Roth IRA, put the 6,000, 6,500 in there every year, and that's it. And then they can manage it. So, and then realize that there's so many different ways that the wealthy invest in that you can diversify so that you can be inflation proof almost. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, wow, I cannot imagine, because I have an 8-month-old, and I can imagine seeing it, imagine less than a pound and what that must have been for you, from 23 weeks and on, and how she's grown. And we were just talking a little bit about her before the show, and how, would you mind sharing, where she's at right now?
Yeah. Well, so she's in 4th grade now. She's 10 years old, going on 11 here pretty quick. She has done so well in so many things. I'm so grateful to the doctors and nurses we've had along the way. She's definitely a miracle in so many ways. I mean, I looked at other kids that were with us in the NICU, and so many had eyesight issues, intestinal issues, and we didn't have those things at all. She didn't have any brain hemorrhaging, which could have been horrible. So we didn't have any of those things. We did have some after effects. She did come home on oxygen after being in the NICU for a few months. She has always been a bit slower at catching on to stuff. She has a beautiful smile, great laugh. She's in a class with other kids. She is considered special needs. So she does get pulled out of the class to work on various things. But she really, has a big passion for a lot of different things and just doing what other kids do. If you talk to her, you would have no idea. that she was an extreme preemie, unless maybe neonatologists might be able to catch it, but most of us wouldn't. So she's a blessing. She's a miracle. And we just keep on working with her on different things. And as with all of us, she's a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. But gosh, she's here and defied all of the odds. She probably had
Wow.
20% chance of making it. So
That's amazing. And I think that just reminds us that all we can do is to remain present, with our family. And the reason why we talk about financial freedom a lot of times is so that we can spend time with our loved ones, to
yeah,
do what we like, to spend time with them for however long we would like, to take them on trips, to make their dreams and experiences come true. Right.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I definitely understand part of your why for doing all this too. It's for your family, the physicians, and in regards to all these different types of investing. And would you please share kind of like what a vision would be like if they decide to diversify? Because many of us think in terms of, okay, Roth index funds. So what is like the end goal that they can potentially achieve in terms of time freedom, financial freedom by diving into other types of investments?
Well, I'll say this, Ann. I think, in my opinion, stocks and mutual funds and 401ks are the most passive thing you can do. People talk about passive income or passive investments. I mean, really, are you deciding the 500 stocks in the S&P 500? No, you're not. I mean, it's the most passive thing you could do. One of the lowest cost things you can do. So people should do that, in my opinion, and should participate in. And if you participate in those things, that often can give you leverage that you can use to invest in other stuff. So it's a really great starting place for so many of us. So, for example, I'll give an example of this. Let's say I have a 401k. I'm putting money in my 401k every month. Then let's say I have 50,000 in it now. And now I want to explore something else, like real estate. Well, there's no better person to loan from than yourself. So you could take a loan out from your 401k and use that money to invest in a piece of real estate or invest into a syndication or invest in something to help make you money and diversify outside of it. So I'd always emphasize start with the foundation, just like you talked about. Have the Roth, have the 401k. You can even end up doing self-directed stuff. So that's where I think you should always start. Now, after you've built a foundation, after maybe you've paid down some of your debts, if you look at something like Dave Ramsey, he does a wonderful job of teaching people about debt. Certainly, if you have a 2% mortgage, you probably don't need to worry about paying that off anytime soon. But if you have a 20% interest rate credit card, now we got some issues. So I'm going to assume for the purpose of this discussion that that stuff's been handled and us busy professionals doing this are doing well on those basic two things. So now at this point, I really think in this world, and I'm guessing you might agree with me, Anne, that who knows what's going to happen in the future with our government, with Social Security, with Medicare. And so many of us are solo income dependent, meaning that if you lose your job, like you're screwed. You don't have other income coming in to help you out. Maybe you have a spouse, maybe you don't. Particularly if you don't have a working spouse, you are in danger, in my opinion, of not being in a secure financial spot. So what do we do? What do we do? How do you get started? What does that look like? I think you have to explore and figure out, to use your term, zone of genius. What is your zone of genius? What are you interested in? What are you passionate about? What can make money? So some people do this by having Amazon businesses. They love making products, or they can find a market where they can come in. I think you had made like an umbrella with a cup holder at one time. So that can be a great way for some people to create an income stream that, I hate the term passive. I like the term residual, because you make that umbrella thing, there's work involved with that, right? Like you got to deal with the customers, you have to create it, you have to change it. I'm sure you could speak to that or have spoke to that in a different podcast. But it is residual income in that, hey, you make it, and for a time period, there can be orders coming in while you're sleeping overnight. Some people write books. Some people like us have a podcast that you can get sponsors for. Some people invest in real estate. Me personally, for myself, just speaking to my story, I really had helped my parents manage some real estate properties, and I hated it. I couldn't stand dealing with tenants, and I'm not a handy dude. So, like fixing stuff and being great with my hands and knowing the difference between this drywall and that drywall and this plumbing and that plumbing, like, I don't care about that stuff. I don't have any interest in it. But with my training and background, I love spreadsheets and I love people and helping people. And so I really tried a few different things and landed into land investing. And that for me, with my skill set, I could make money at it. I liked it, and it could really propel our family's wealth. And so I still invest in 401ks, but I also put a lot of my money towards that. And now in that business, I have 400 people that are paying me monthly on notes. So that's how I've gone about it, where now for years to come, if I wanted to stop investing, I could easily collect $30,000 or $40,000 a month in residual income from all of this land we've invested in the last 5 years.
Wow, I don't know much about land investing. We're going to definitely dive deep into this. And I completely agree with you. For those of you listening, the basics are you want to save up, would you say 6 months or 12 months emergency fund?
I think you should always be adding to it, frankly. So start with 3 months, and then you should keep on working your way towards it with non-qualified monies. Monies that are not in an IRA account, not in a Roth. You should be adding to that every month. So that way you can use that money to invest in other stuff. But it's hard to invest in many other things outside of the stock market for $5,000, and get great returns from. So,
Oh,
I think start with that, add to it every single month.
okay, got it. And then, yes, definitely pay off your debt and then also invest in the Roth, invest in the index funds, and then think about your zone of genius. You're right. I did create the Amazon. It was from a 4 Hours Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Inspiration. Learned a lot about import, export, talking to manufacturers and design and CADs and CAD files and things like that. Anyway, customer relations, storage. I don't do it anymore, but I learned so much from it. And sometimes it's not a failure. Even if you try, you learn so much for the next endeavor, which is podcasting for me, productivity doctor. And then regarding the real estate loan, it's so key. For my first real estate purchase with the fourplex, I did borrow from my 401k with a university. And so it was 50,000, it was a max. And I paid myself back 4% interest.
Right? And you're not paying the bank. It goes back in your own pocket.
Exactly. So I'm just paying back 1 more%. It's amazing. And then so regarding the diversification even further than that, so would you tell us, for those of you who know nothing about land investing, what exactly is it and how much do you make? And what about like the time frame for it? And I know you have a land investing business as well. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. So the basic idea, I'm going to keep this real high level without getting too much into the weeds of it. But the basic idea is we are finding properties under $100,000 in value, and we're making offers to the current owners. And so often I do that through direct mail. We've recently gotten more into texting. I might do it through tax lien foreclosures or tax deed auctions, but it really kind of started out with mailing. And so I would mail thousands of people who own land in certain counties and certain states. And so I particularly focused on the Southwest. So Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. I bought some in Oregon as well. But in that case, there's a lot of subdivided land. So most of them have legal and physical access, meaning you can get to the property legally, as well as they have roads that they maintain to some degree. And so I would often offer $1,000 for a property that, when I look at available comps, that they're $4,000. And so you can imagine, hey, if I have $20,000, that means I could buy 20 properties in different parts of the country, in the Southwest in particular. And so then once I own the property, we do what's called self-closing, meaning we deal with the deed and whatnot. Then I then sell the property either for cash, a cash flip, or I sell it on owner financing, which is those 400 notes I was talking about earlier. And so the benefit of cash is, well, you turn the money quickly and you get paid that back, plus a very handsome return on investment. Now, keep in mind, there's the $1,000 cost, but there's my mailing costs. In my case, I have a lot of staff running the business for me. So there's some of my staff costs. There's various CRMs and softwares we have. So it looks like, a 300% ROI, but it's not really a 300% ROI. But even if it's 100% or 150% or 200%, I mean, you can't find those kind of returns in many other places. Owner financing, we get an even larger ROI, but it's spread over several years. And I create streams of income for myself. In this case, I have 400 of them from 400 different properties. So with land, you can diversify quickly. Some people in the land business, they focus on higher dollar properties. So they'll buy for 30,000, sell for 60 or 70,000. Those margins aren't as thick, but the dollar amount's larger. So they do less buying. Like for myself, last year we bought 200 properties or so, and we sold 300 something because I had a bunch in inventory. And so I was doing a high volume business. Other people do maybe buy or sell one a month, two a month, but they're doing larger dollar. So you have to figure out kind of what works for you. I do a little bit of everything because I'm just intellectually curious and want to try different things. But that's the basics of the model and kind of what you do.
And how do you purchase land property that's worth under 100,000 for 1,000?
Well, just think about it this way. So, Anne, if you have a property that's, let's say it's worth $30,000, and a realtor says, okay, I'll sell it for you, how much are they going to get paid for selling that property?
3%?
Which is?
Of 30,000?
$900, right?
Yeah, 900.
And then maybe people don't realize that if they have a brokerage company, which almost all realtors do, they take a cut of that too, right? So they have $900. Their broker might take 30% of that. So they're left with, let's say, 600. What realtor wants to work hard for $600?
None, probably.
None. So that's why I'm here and other people like me, because what realtor would prefer that versus a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 house? We're providing liquidity in a market that's not liquid easily.
And how do the sellers agree to that?
So they basically sign the deeds and we send them the check.
1,000.
Yeah.
But just because they're not using that land, and so
they're not using the land. In a lot of cases, it's older people, or it might be someone that's gone through a divorce, might be someone that inherited property and they don't know what the heck to do with it. Might be someone that maybe they're in a bad financial situation and they have a bunch of back owed taxes on the property and they're about to lose it. So at least they get paid something from us rather than getting nothing from the property. So, I mean, imagine you're paying $100 a year in property taxes on a property and you're not doing anything with it. Maybe you had the dream at one point that you were going to build on it or camp on it, but reality is you're not using it anymore.
So you only buy land, not land with distressed structure above that you have
Correct.
To demolish.
Raw land in the middle of nowhere.
And you only buy land that's more of a smaller parcel, correct? So that's under 100,000. And then you would offer the seller and the agent a total of 1,000?
Mostly we don't deal with agents at all. So
okay.
Agents aren't even involved. We deal directly with the seller.
And I'm curious, and I don't know if you'll be able to share it, like out of all of the mailing that you send out or the communication you send out, what would be the success rate?
Well, it depends on the property, right? So a property we buy for $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 might be one out of every 600 or 700 letters. A property that's worth more, let's say I think it's worth $30,000 and I'm buying it for $10,000, it's going to take more letters on average to get those kind of properties. So it might be 2,000 letters or 2,500 letters. If you deal with property worth $100,000, it might take 5,000 or 6,000 letters on average to get there. So it means you need more data, more mail volume. for that business I was talking about that is lower volume. For me, I'm taking less risk, but I'm doing more volume versus someone that's taking more risk, but less volume.
Got it. And so essentially they'll respond, you make the offer, or you make the offer in the letter already. That
It's a blind offer.
It's a blind offer, and then they respond, you buy it at such a discount because you make the money at purchase, really. So you've already made your money at purchase so that you can either turn around and flip it or sell it to somebody else who actually wants the land and to build something on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't improve it. I don't do anything with it. I just sell it. I've been thinking about testing out, putting septic on some of them that are worth more. So if I buy a property for $20,000, well, maybe I can put septic on it and add value to it. So I've been tinkering with that idea, but generally that's not something that I've done or intend to do a lot of. It'll make a good YouTube video for our sellers, our buyers.
And where do we go to learn this? Is there a syndication for this? And how can we get started?
I don't do syndications at all. You and I, we're talking on my podcast, and I hate those things personally for me. And so I don't want to do it. I don't want to deal with that. I more love people owning their own businesses to be able to figure out, like in my case, I put a bunch of virtual assistants around me so I don't have to do all these aspects of the business. It's very, very rare that I will talk with a seller that's selling us property or a buyer because I have a team around me that helps me with all of those things. And I certainly, I'm involved, but I'm not doing all of the day-to-day stuff that a lot of the other people do. So I have on my website, daviddenniston.com. If you go there, I have under blogs quite a few videos. Some are on land flipping, some are on tax lien, some are on some of the usual financial stuff, backdoor Roths and tax loss harvesting and all kinds of really great information there. So that's a great place to start. I give people a much longer overview and some of the details than what we have here today. But there's also a lot of people in this space that have courses. I don't have a course. I don't want to have a course because it takes a lot of time. I'm already busy as a financial advisor, meeting with clients and running my land business and tax liens. I'm good. I don't need a course to put out there that you have to maintain and answer people's questions and whatever. So for example, if you listen to episodes of my podcast, The Freedom Formula for Physicians, I've had people on there that do have courses like Seth Williams from RE Tipster. Great guy, great course. Justin Sleva and Adam Southey from Casual Fridays REI. They have a great course. I came up originally through the Land Geek. I do not recommend his stuff, but he does have a course. There's the Land Academy people. They have a course. So there's a good number of people that have courses on it. I personally do help coach people as part of my financial planning practice. So we'll talk about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, backdoor Roth IRAs, cash balance plans, self-directed 401s, all of that kind of great stuff. And so I can consult with people hourly. And I usually suggest, hey, take one of these courses first. And I'd be happy to coach you, afterwards to help you get to, where you want to get to in the business. But I'm not going to do it for you. So it's really for people that are numbers oriented, that love this concept of buying low, selling high, and you can make the time for it. Because like with any business, it takes time, but it doesn't have to take 20 hours a week. I know people doing this business 2 hours a day or less. Some do it maybe 5 hours a week. So you can do this business without a lot of effort. It's just a matter of what kind of business do you want. I'll tell you can't do a volume business like I've done with that kind of time, unless you have people around you that you're leveraging their time to do so. That's a long answer to your question, Anne. So
no, that's great. First is to get educated in more detail. First is to realize that that's there. The opportunity is there for you. And then you go and get educated, take a course on it, go to the website and look at the videos and check it out and listen to your podcast, right?
Yes,
and then
absolutely.
I know we're almost short on time, so I want to touch on very briefly. You talk about tax loss harvesting. What is the general concept? Because this is something that people can actually implement pretty soon or as needed. So would you kind of explain that a little bit to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two different kinds of monies that you have invested, either qualified, meaning things like 401ks, Roth IRAs that are part of the IRS tax code, or non-qualified, meaning money you have at the bank in your checking account. That's non-qualified. An investment account that's not an IRA or Roth. It could be a revocable trust. It could be an account just in your name. That is non-qualified monies. So when we're talking about tax loss harvesting, we're not talking about 401ks or Roths. You can't do that there. This is non-qual, NQ, non-qualified monies. So let's say we had a year like last year, right? You had an account. It was invested in the NASDAQ ETF. And so your account went from $100,000 down to $65,000 last year. Well, what you can do is, let's say that with that investment, you sold enough worth of it to generate a loss of $3,000. You can write that off on your taxes. And then a month later, after you've harvested that loss, you can rebuy the same thing again, but you have to wait a whole month. So you could potentially miss out on some market gain, or you could buy something different. So if you had the NASDAQ, maybe you buy the S&P 500, or you buy an IPO ETF, or something like that you could invest in. That might be different, but kind of similar. So powerful strategy to use. All of us could use a little bit of a tax write-off, and this is a great way to do it, particularly after a year like last year where so many of us are down. Utilize that in those non-qualified accounts to make your taxes a little bit lower this year.
Yeah, and just so that I'm clear, so you're saying if you have a net loss, then you should sell that, then wait a month, you can buy it back or invest in something else, but that loss is locked in and that can offset not the active gains, right? Not like W-2 or anything like that, but
Right.
only the any sort of Roth or 401k type gains. Is that what you're talking about?
It actually can offset your W-2 income too, up to $3,000. So this is on the first page of the 1040. So the first page of the 1040, you have wages and salaries. This is line like 17, capital gain or loss. So the capital loss directly deducts right from your W-2 income. Absolutely. But only up to $3,000 a year.
Does this apply to crypto?
Sure. Absolutely.
Huh. Well then. That's awesome.
And keep in mind that what I was saying of buying the same exact thing as a month later, you don't have to wait if you're buying something different. So using cryptos as an example, you held Bitcoin. So you sell Bitcoin and you buy Ethereum. You could do that immediately. You don't have to wait a month for that. But if you wanted to rebuy Bitcoin, you got to wait a month.
I did not know that. Thank you for that. This is
Yes.
And I didn't know it could offset your W-2 income or 1099 income, actually.
Yes. What happens is sometimes people will harvest like $30,000 worth of losses. Well, now you can only write off $3,000 a year. Or if you have gains, you can do that to offset the gains too. So let's say someone had sold Bitcoin for a huge profit. They bought it at $2,000. They sold it for $50,000. So now you have this $48,000 capital gain per Bitcoin, right? Well, you could harvest some losses. Let's say you had losses in Ethereum. You could harvest some losses in Ethereum to offset those gains.
Got it. Okay, so make sure that if you have losers already, make sure you take advantage of the tax loss harvesting rule so that it can benefit your winners.
That's right. If it's from when you bought it, not during the year. So if you bought Bitcoin 2 years ago and you've lost majorly, you can do it. So it's not from January 1st what it was worth. It's from when you originally bought it, the cost basis of it.
Though I guess the question is, if you bought it originally, it's been 2 years and then you sold it, then it only applies to that year's deduction, or can it carry forward if you have excess loss?
If you have excess loss, like I was talking about, like $30,000, you can only write off $3,000 a year. So the $27,000 carries forward to the next tax year, which then, assuming you had nothing else that you bought or sold, then the $27,000, you deduct another $3,000, now it's $24,000 loss.
Mm-hmm.
What sucks is the government has no cap on what they can tax you, right? There's no $3,000 cap on capital gains. You make $100,000, they're going to tax you on the whole thing.
Okay, I didn't know it rolls forward. So the 27,000, if you have other gains that's $27,000, it can fully offset that. But if you don't, then it just carries you forward to offset whatever other gains that you have.
That's right. So I know, Anne, we talked about on my podcast, you had sold a quadplex. So that, let's say you had a big gain for that, that's a capital gain, right? So if you had Bitcoin that sucked, you could have sold some of the Bitcoin that was at a loss to offset some of the gain from the real estate.
I did sell the Bitcoin at a huge loss.
Well, there you go. So it sucks. Not a great thing, but it can help to offset some of those gains.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, got it. Because it's passive bucket. What, I guess, if it's, I don't know if the right category, but it's a more passive offsetting passive, right? Essentially. Okay. Wow.
But it does offset against active income though.
As well, like partially, like the 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
But for the real estate portions, because it's passive, offsetting passive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Wow. I think you just saved me more money.
All right. So everyone should
plenty.
look for that every year. Every year, I think harvest, October, November, look to see where you are for the year on all your different investments. Or if you have a financial advisor, make sure you're on them to take a look at it, because that can help save you some money for sure.
This is already amazing. So just the last portion, what would you say would be the biggest mistakes for either medical students, interns, attendings, or people who are advancing their career? I'm just curious to know any like major biggest mistakes you see.
Absolutely. So let's talk residents a little bit. Residents, I think too many make a mistake of buying a house too early, because the problem is you don't know where you're going to be, right? You might have started in Houston like you do, and then your fellowship's in San Antonio. And so you have this home now, and you can't really afford two different places on a resident salary, because if someone isn't paying you enough rent, now you're cash flow negative, right? So that's a big mistake I see a lot of residents and fellows making. I think number two being for residents and fellows, really just getting started in a 401k or something like that, which I think most residents and fellows, you're best off using Roth. Do Roth money, because you don't need the tax deduction. You're only making $50,000, right? So maybe $60,000. You don't need a tax deduction. So use Roth, not traditional IRA or 401k. I would say a third thing for residents and fellows that I would point out from my experience is, of course, some of us get in debt, along the way. And as you've been living lean and mean, I see some people starting to expand their lifestyle, even as a resident. They'll buy a new car rather than a used car, and they get more debt added on. So that's the third mistake I would see residents and fellows I typically see making. Any questions, thoughts, comments on that?
No, I agree. I've seen all of it. I've seen I've seen the car too, and affected somebody's credit. So yeah, I fully agree. I'm driving my 2008 Nissan Altima.
Yes.
Right. I still don't want to buy a car because I feel like it's a liability.
It is. No, totally. It totally is. Totally is. I would say, if you are an attending physician, maybe newly attending, really that whole lifestyle creep, people get so anxious because you've been living in an apartment, you've been living in a box, for so long. It's like, oh, I want my first house. And I think so many physicians buy too early because they're not thinking about, hey, in Los Angeles, you have to have a lot of money down and that mortgage is gigantic versus, hey, if you worked in Alaska for a few years, you could bank way more money than in LA and you could afford something quicker. So I think don't be too anxious to buy the mansion, or really be careful of the price range that you're buying a house in, because then now you can't have more money to invest, whether in real estate or in your 401k. And your budget is constrained again after it was just constrained before. Give yourself a chance for freedom in your budget so you're not so tight every month. And if you buy a big house or you buy that $1 million house, that's going to hurt. So I'd say that's a big mistake for newly attending ones. I think number two, I would say, would be that you really aren't maxing out the 401k type plans. So many of us do up to the match, which is awesome, and you should. And that's kind of the minimum, but you really should do a little bit more than that when you're newly attending, if you're able to keep your lifestyle relatively low. And then I think number three is really getting education on starting to think about multiple streams of income. Like, can you buy into that surgery center of the surgery center that you go visit, for example? And doing stuff local to you makes an awful lot of sense. Can you buy the building that you have your practice in? Or just start thinking about some of those things and getting educated on what they are, whether it's syndications or we were talking land investing earlier or tax liens, getting educated on it. Not that you're necessarily taking a lot of action yet, because maybe you're 30 to 40 years old, you're having kids and, you're trying to get your family going and you don't have a lot of time, but get educated so you can get a handle on what do you like, what do you not like, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I would say podcasts or audiobooks. That's the way to do it if you have a commute. And think about if you do have a spouse or kids, to start then and do it for them. Because instead of waiting until, your 50s, 60s, and who knows, like anything can happen any day. So you want to be prepared for your family in case you yourself somehow are not healthy enough to work anymore. Then who is going to have the income for your family? Right?
Exactly.
And anything in terms of like a more advanced people and further out in their career.
Yeah, I think if you've been practicing for 20 years, let's say you're in your 50s now, I think really at this point you should be debt free or close to debt free. Even the mortgage, in my opinion, should be close to being paid off by this time. So if you're not, now you're being a slave to working, right? So those are goals we should have, not in your 40s, not in your 30s, but by your 50s. You should have no student loan debt. You should have no car loans. You should have no mortgage, in my opinion, by the end of your 50s as you're going into your 60s. And I see a lot of physicians and just general professionals that's the case. They still have a $400,000 mortgage in their 50s. It's a very difficult position. Number two, I think, is really having those multiple streams of income now established. You are having, whether it's rental houses or some of the things we talked about, you should have multiple streams of income by this time. And so many people don't. And I think that's a mistake. I think the third thing, really the big mistake I see a lot of people make is paying too much for their kids' education at this stage of life. So I'll give you a personal example in my case. So my daughter is 17. She actually is talking about wanting to be a physician, maybe neurology or neurosurgery. She's not sure yet, but I told her that the most I'm going to pay for your education is $30,000 a year. That's it. Here she got accepted to Cornell, and we're waiting to find out what, if any, financial aid they're going to do. I'm only doing $30K. I'm not going to pay $70,000 or $80,000 a year and have that hurt our financial future. And so many people give that up for their kids, and it delays their retirement and their financial freedom for years to come. It's not that it's a bad decision. It just has consequences attached with it, which God bless those people who do that for their kids, but I want to pay for my daughter's public education. And if she can get financial aid and scholarships and stuff outside of that, and she works it, definitely, let's go for it. Let's do Cornell and see if it works out. Or if they provide enough of a package that's not debt, right? If it's $50,000 in debt, I'm not going to co-sign on that loan. That ain't going to happen. So those are the different mistakes, I would say. That as you're getting closer to retirement, boy, you better watch out for those things.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't actually think about that since my son is 8 months old. I didn't think, who knows how much it's going to be when he's 18. Oh my goodness,
I know, right?
I can't imagine.
So, or is college even necessary? I mean, if your kid is an English major, should they really be going to Cornell or Dartmouth or Harvard? Like, I don't think that's really necessary for an English major. Why not go to the community college or a public school? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, or if you want to be an entrepreneur or trade school and go out and intern everywhere, go to learn different skills and actual entrepreneurial skills.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're pushed to go to college or have our kids go to college, but it's not sometimes really not necessary because it depends on their passion, right? So I think we've like unpacked like so much like in our time here. As a summary, what we talked about, the tax lien, tax loss harvesting, or land investing, tax loss harvesting, and some of the biggest mistakes, like in terms of, paying off your debt, having emergency saving fund, doing your Roth IRA, your index funds, and then making sure you diversify multiple streams of income for residual income, and to make sure you're not expanding your purchases or your lifestyle too early, either as a resident, medical, or medical student, young attending, and then later on as a older attending, established attending. Make sure you have the debt paid off and not overspend for your children's education, unless you're not in debt anymore, and then you have the ability to do it, I guess. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Does that sound like a good summary? Anything you would like to add to that? Anything? And also, how can people find you?
Absolutely. I think so many physicians never got training on finances. And so many of us are trying to change that. Yourself, myself, the white coat investor. So many people. There's so many resources out there for everyone today. So please, check some of them out. I've written a number of different books. People are welcome to look at The Freedom Formula for Physicians is the name of one of my books. The Young Physician's Guide to Money and Life is another one that I co-wrote with Amanda Liu while she had passed away. And I have other ones out there on debt and taxes and whatnot. So lots of great resources for folks that are available. Certainly they're welcome to check out my podcast. I have 8 years worth of content on my podcast called The Freedom Formula for Physicians after my book. And if they ever want to check out any of the land things or tax liens, I have lots of videos on my website, daviddenniston.com, for people to check out. Of course, if you want to reach out to me, you're interested in maybe having a 30-minute strategy session, I'd be happy to sew into you and give to you for 30 minutes for free. Feel free to email my assistant, Robbie, spelled just like it sounds, at daviddenniston.com.
And how do you spell Robbie?
His name, Robbie.
Robbie, assistant at
daviddenniston.com. So his name isn't in the email, assistant at daviddenniston.com.
Okay, got it. So for those of you guys listening, go ahead and email Robbie right now. Just take that action step and get your 30-minute strategy call, because one micro step will lead to the next one, and then your end vision or it will be exponential. It will be completely different if you just make this 2-millimeter shift right now. So again, thank you so much, Dave, for being on the show. I know that our audience has gained so much insight and value from it. I know I learned something new. I'm going to go look at my investments right now and go tax loss harvest right after this. So again, thank you so much. And I want the audience to remember that everything we need is within us now.
Love it. Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And also, please go to itsnotrocketscienceshow.com. We will have the episode show notes, all of the links that we talked about, all the resources we talked about. And if you want a 60-minute complimentary call with me to assess your productivity, how to free up time so you can look at all these investing strategies, go ahead and go to AnnSung.md.com. That's ANNTSUNG.com, and go ahead and apply and book your 60-minute complimentary coaching. And again, thank you so much. Have an amazing day.
That's it for today's episode. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review in iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a private VIP day for a health and life makeover with Dr. Ann Sung herself. Then be sure to head on over to itsnotrocketscienceshow.com and pick up your free gift from Dr. Sung. Then join us on the next episode.